property. I think it's the easement on the
Oh,
14.
going after him.
This property. I think it's the, you have to ask the question to get the same answer.
Maybe it's fine.
So the Wayne and Stephanie, did y'all read that little article that they sent? Yeah. Y'all got quoted. It was a great little picture, though. It had, you know, you're going along, and then here's this little Belton, and they attributed that Hugh Shine lives in Belton. I don't think he does, but you know, according to the article, he represents Belton. Yeah. Except on that bill.
This road is past. All no in that place. It's so a little bit dry on your property. And I'm not on it. A lot of hunters have just found out about it. And they came because you know, the problem was some people floated in to shoot deer or something.
Yeah.
But they would do
Greg, can you hear us? All right.
Loud and clear.
All right. Welcome to the oasis of air conditioning. I'm done with the heat. I think I'm just gonna go curl up in a refrigerator somewhere. I don't know what's going on. So again, welcome this evening. We were going to start our Tuesday, August 8th meeting here, 5:30. We will start with me leading the pledge of the U.S. flag. Joel Guzman will lead to the pledge to the Texas flag, and then Mayor Wayne Carpenter will lead our invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one state under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to come together this afternoon to conduct the business of our city. Help us make wise decisions and do the things that you would have us to do. Thank you for all the blessings that you've bestowed on Belton in the past. For the people who continue to work to make it a great place to live, we especially ask your protection over our first responders, and especially for everyone who's out working in this heat these days, as well as military, both at home. Forgive us when we fail thee. In Christ's name we ask it. Amen.
Amen. And I will note that Councilmember Craig Pearson is joining us from Panama City Beach, Florida, but he should be on the road here in the next couple of days, maybe back in time for maybe a little respite from all this weather. So we'll call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is public comments. I have one that has signed up for public comment, and that is Woody Durbin. It's all yours. What name and address for the record?
But anyway, I have two things. One, disc golf has been a big part of my life. I see some downgrading on the course and whatnot. I know there's been construction and this and that, but some people have been turned loose with how it's being done. I would ask that you let me kind of oversee that. I don't have to be crazy about it, but there's some things that when people go in and do something like that, they're throwing down trails because they don't want to clear fairways. And along with that, I would operate city equipment to get some of that stuff opened up and cleaned out. which I did in the beginning anyway. That's that one. The other one, and I noticed the last thing on the deal is y'all's meeting tonight about real property. I'm always wanting to get this off my chest. Never really come up in any news or anything, so get a hold of this one. I raised my kids in Belton K through 12. They're Aggies. Both of them, both have their masters, both own their own homes. Started that within the third year. We're all three paying taxes and no kids in school. I don't, but I'm just saying, when y'all do your budget, would you look at that? For us old guys. And some of you are getting there and I'm not the only one. There's others way down the line. That's the only two things I had. Is that 3 minutes?
Thank you,
each
Woody.
One of you. Thank you, Mr. Covington, for serving.
And we'll follow up with the staff on the disc golf.
I did have one more. Please do. The tournament, we've got Labor Day. Gonna be a week-long deal. I've tried to get in contact with Christina or Christy. Anyway, I would like to see some Belton Economic Development Committee, whatever money funds go towards that tournament.
I think that would be community visit, the more tourism than it is economic development. But again, we'll refer those comments to
Same
staff.
with the tourism, all
Yeah.
right, whoever that would be.
Right.
You know who that is? Contact me, would you? Judy?
Yeah, Judy's back there.
We need to talk. I can make this
Right.
happen. I want to keep the place alive. I put you on the map. Let's keep it there.
All right. Thank you, Woody. All right. Next item is a proclamation recognizing Matthew Hampton as Freedom Award recipient in the Trail Life USA program. I'm going to, since I've got a microphone here, I'm going to read it and then we will come down and do it.
I just wanted you to know the pictures on the screen. On him, very beginning, his tenure with this group.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, wow. Before and after. That's pretty cool. All right, so here we go. My favorite. Whereas the Belton City Council recognized the valuable contributions of our citizens who are striving to improve our community and set a positive example through service and stewardship. And whereas one of Belton's own, Matthew Hampton, age 17, received the highest award, Trail Life USA, a Christ-centered outdoor character development adventure program. And whereas the vision of Trail Life USA, which is geared for boys aged 5 to 17, is to instill 6 basic values: teamwork, character, wisdom, leadership, heritage, and faith. And whereas Matthew and the other young men in Troop 1274 have been guided by their fathers to become a generation of godly and responsible citizens. And whereas to earn the Freedom Award, as Matthew did, is a feat achieved by very few. It is the apex of the Trail Life USA program. And through this achievement, Matthew has made his mark on Central Texas gem, Chalk Ridge Falls Park. And whereas the trailhead kiosk at the Chalk Ridge Falls Park, which is the trail he first hiked with Trail Life at age 9, is now fully restored, and Matthew demonstrated his mastery of a significant skill, earning 25 badges. And whereas the city of Belton appreciates Matthew's dedication and his effort to restore the trailhead kiosk that will last for years and benefit the community who enjoy this park. Now, therefore, I, David K. Lee, Mayor of the city of Belton, in recognition of this service to the citizens of the city of Belton, Texas, do hereby declare August 8th, 2023 as Matthew Hampton Day. Then congratulations. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Items 4 through 6 are under this section are considered routine and can be enacted by one motion. If anyone wants to discuss it, they can pull this item. I'm going to read the items and then we can consider discussion or pulling or motion. First one is item 4 is consider minutes of the July 25th council meeting. Item 5 is consider reappointments to the following boards and commissions. So for the Public Property Finance Corporation Board of Directors will be Bill Holmes, Daniel Bucher, and Stephanie O'Banion. Also, the Zoning Board of Adjustments will be Amanda Hendrick, Robin Allenez, Garrett Smith, Judy Owens as an alternate, and Rucker Preston as an alternate. And then item 6 is consider resolution approving a negotiated settlement between Atmos Cities Steering Committee and Atmos Energy Corporation Midtex Division regarding the company's 2023 rate review mechanism filing. Chair will entertain a motion, or we can pull any items you wish.
I move we approve items 4 through 6 on the consent agenda.
A motion and a second to approve these items. Any other discussion before we vote? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 7 is going to be a multimedia marvel, and so we will pause for a second so we can split the screen. Is this right?
It's good right now. We should be able to start.
Okay. All right. So item 7 is to receive a presentation from the Hunden Group on the updated hotel motel feasibility study. All right. This was going to be given remotely, or is, we're going to start with you, Judy, right? Okay. Thank you.
City Council. In 2017, the city retained Huntington's strategic partners to study the market and financial feasibility study of a conference center and hotel development. In the study, it showed 3 different scenarios. At the time, the city wasn't quite mature enough for this. So due to Belton's growth over the last 7 years, hotel developers and hotel brands both have requested that we have another study. So we invited Hunden Strategic Partners to update the study. I'm very excited to introduce Rob Hunden and Ron Sheridan, who will present the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Just to recap here, we produced a written study of about 82 pages, but to spare you all from having to read all 82 pages, we've broken it down into a little bit of an executive summary presentation here. So we'll quickly take you through some of the high-level headline findings of the project as it relates to the updated study, again, as Judy mentioned, from 2017. So the scope of the project in total, first we took a look at the economic, demographic, and tourism analysis of the city, understood the local hotel market analysis, expanding out a little bit beyond just the city and some of the surrounding cities as well. Produced a site analysis on some different plots of land within the city and really tried to understand what made the most sense for a future hotel development within the city. And then we'll finish with some of our high-level recommendations, the demand and financial projections, as well as the economic, fiscal, and employment impact analysis of the project. So just to start, some of the key questions that we aim to answer throughout the study. Understanding what the market opportunity is for a conference center hotel development within Belton, understanding what the current trends are in conference center facilities and what can be learned from them as it relates to the potential development of a conference center hotel in the city, understanding the existing supply of competitive local and regional meeting and event facilities, and really trying to understand, is there a gap for the project within the city? Understanding the demand for meeting facilities within the city, as well as some of the site options for a conference center hotel and what are the pros and cons of each site. Some of the headlines just up front. Location and growth within the city has certainly presented itself as a development opportunity for a conference center hotel in Belton. Belton is currently losing a lot of events and room night business to surrounding communities due to the lack of hotel room night supply within the city. Market rates in the surrounding area and in the city suggest that a full service property would not be able to be supported without significant public investment. However, a 150 room select service plus property with a ballroom and meeting rooms is recommended, even though this would still likely require public investment. Again, each site presents its pros and cons, but after updating the study, we believe that the downtown site is currently recommended due to momentum in the local economy, as well as the current lack of walkable amenities adjacent to the Bell County Expo Center. But we'll get into why we chose those as the headlines here in a minute. Just a little bit of the situational overview. Again, we were retained to provide a feasibility study covering the future hotel growth trends, the competitive supply within the city and the surrounding communities, as well as provide recommendations, demand and financial projections, as well as economic impact projections for the project. With the update, we took a look and focused on 2 sites. The first site being the Bell County Expo Center and being adjacent to Highway 35, as well as Site 2 being located in downtown Belton. Throughout the process in 2017, we interviewed many groups, and with the updated study, we interviewed these groups again, adding some individuals to the mix and some groups to the mix, but really tried to get an understanding of the current demand levels and understanding just the lack of supply and what that means to the city currently and how the project can address and fill those holes in the future. So starting off with a SWOT analysis for the project, certainly a lot of strengths. One being the Bell County Expo Center, all the visitation that the facility has been able to bring in, especially with the recent expansion of the facility, as well as some other demand generators such as the university. Certainly a potential for strong visibility and access of a hotel within Belton. Opportunities for groups to really come in and own the community and experience what the city of Belton's all about. Really acting as a catalyst to a flight of quality for other properties currently within the market, and really just overall community growth and the overall exposure of the city of Belton in total. Some opportunities that the project brings, the potential to host meetings and events that currently can't be held within the city. The opportunity to really introduce a product of high quality or select or full service hotel into the market that currently is not there, as well as the project acting as a catalytic development for other hotels or other commercial assets within the city that currently aren't there. Some weaknesses, lack of traditional demand generators, and really still a small market, but a lot of that growth potential taking care of the fact that the city is still relatively small compared to other surrounding markets. And then just some threats, overall economic downturns and existing and proposed competitive developments in surrounding communities. So again, just a site overview really quickly, with site option 1 being adjacent to the Bell County Expo Center. Really a game changer for tourism within Belton. However, again, the aerial kind of highlighting the lack of walkable amenities outside of the Bell County Expo Center. So site option number 1, and then site option number 2 being just generically in downtown Belton. With a lot of momentum coming out of COVID, with some new retailers, some festivals and events that have really kind of helped the downtown area bounce back, and certainly a very strong option for a hotel to be placed in the downtown area with some of the demand drivers that are located down there. Again, as it relates to the local hotel market analysis, really the map tells the story as it relates to the supply in Belton. Highlighted by the Expo Inn and Suites, as well as the La Quinta being the 2 main hotel properties. Again, there are some bed and breakfasts and some rental properties, short-term rental properties, but really, as far as the local hotel market goes, a lot of the concentration being located along I-35 and in Temple, around the medical district, but also just being located in downtown Temple as well. So the city of Belton losing a lot of room nights to folks that are coming into the city, but don't have a place to stay and opting to choose hotels currently in Temple, leading to lost tax generation within the city. So certainly a gap in the market for more hotel properties, with all of the demand being sourced throughout the city of Belton. I apologize. So currently, overall, as it stands, the lack of lodging facilities in the downtown area does not allow the city to capitalize on the visitation that is being generated by the city. And a lot of that is being lost for the downtown businesses, not being able to benefit from the influx of tourism. Placement of the hotel downtown would ease accessibility to Belton's businesses, encouraging visitation to the city's unique restaurants, retailers, public areas, and other entertainment offerings. So as it stands, the recommended programming of the hotel would include 150 keys, be a select service property, including some restaurant spaces, as well as including a ballroom of 7,500 square feet divisible by 4 different walls, as well as 5,300 square feet of meeting rooms, bringing the total function space to about 12,800 square feet, supporting the 150 key room property. So just some headlines with the recommendations: overall room count, again, 150 rooms, having a strong room mix between double queens and king beds, being affiliated with a brand, whether that be Marriott, Hilton, or Hyatt. Our projections for the hotel in the demand and financials assumed a Courtyard Marriott development. So again, having that brand presence being very strong as it relates to being able to bring people in and attract loyalty programs to the hotel, as well as having strong amenities on site within the hotel. Again, I mentioned the food and beverage, and while Courtyard Marriotts don't tend to have traditional full service restaurants, they often have bistros with freshly cooked food, prepared breakfasts that are not the typical complimentary breakfasts, as well as some smaller plates, appetizers, and sandwiches. But overall, having some restaurant offerings, as well as that 24-hour kind of mini mart setup that allows for more food and beverage sales in the hotel. And then as far as the function space goes, really a lot of the competitive hotels within the local market not having much function space. So having the hotel include a 7,500 square foot ballroom and the meeting space as well, really setting aside the hotel property within the local market, opening the doors for group business and meetings and events within the city that currently can't be held again. So as far as the demand and financials go for the 150 key property in year one, projecting total revenue of about 6.5 million. As far as net income goes, boiling down to about 1.5 million, or an operating margin of about 23.4%, increasing in efficiency over time to about 9.4 million in revenue by year 10 and 2.6 million in net income over the 10-year time horizon. So as we ran the return on investment and financing analysis, coming up with supportable financing of about $20 million, which would present about 44% of the total estimated project cost, coming in at about 45 million in total. So looking at a gap of about 10 to 15 million for the project. So again, still requiring some public investment in the property, as hotel development costs still certainly continue to escalate, and really the lower rates in the market being the main driver in that financial gap for the project. However, getting into the economic impacts of what the project would bring to the city, as far as direct net new spending goes over a 10-year time horizon, projecting about 112 million in total net new direct spending within the city of Belton. As that direct spending really flows through the local economy, really reaping the benefits of more indirect and induced spending, totaling up to about 195 million over the 10-year time frame. And as a result of that spending, also supporting new direct, indirect, and induced jobs within the market, which yields net new earnings for the city of about $61.5 million in net new earnings, as well as supporting an average of about 283 new annual jobs within the city over the 10-year time frame. So as far as the total economic impact summary goes for the project, again, looking at total spending of about 195 million, net new earnings of about 62 million, supporting about 290 full-time equivalent jobs by year 10. And as far as the city's taxes collecting goes, the city hotel tax getting about 4 million in total collections over 10 years, city sales tax of about 1.7 million, and an increase in property tax of about 2.1 million, totaling about 7.8 total million in taxes throughout the 10 years. And really supporting in terms of construction, another 498 total full-time equivalent jobs. So I think that brings us to the end here, just as that 20 slide summary. So at this point, happy to take any questions and hear any feedback as far as the study update goes.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from council?
I would just say that's very exciting. It's certainly something I think we've known, but to have the data and the conversations and the report is incredibly helpful to show developers our need. That's always been the most frustrating thing when I was in the chamber business, is we can bring all kinds of folks here, but they were always staying across the river. So excited to see what this might help us bring in, and I think it'll be a very useful piece of data in our toolbox.
Yeah, from our perspective, it was kind of disheartening to hear with all the groups that we interviewed that they're putting on these great events, and the university's bringing in a lot of families visiting, and the Bell County Expo Center has really become a great facility from the tourism perspective. But from all the interviews, just hearing that people have opted and really have to leave the city to go spend hotel nights in other surrounding communities and not really getting to enjoy everything that makes Belton in the downtown area was kind of disheartening. So it's definitely a very intriguing project, and it's something that the city definitely needs going forward.
Any other
Yeah.
comments from? Well, I'll say just from a business plans perspective, that's a really good tool. I mean, a developer can pretty much take that and then go start working on financing and get an architect
Yeah.
and a land person.
Yeah.
I found it interesting. You pointed out the Courtyard Marriott. I stayed in one in Fort Mill, South Carolina, a Courtyard Marriott. They had redeveloped a whole area of mills. And so it was a shopping area. There's all these mills, and their conference center had a lot of the mill equipment and a lot of old pictures, almost like our gin. And so Marriott's done a really good job of kind of that boutique in small towns to make it look and feel like the local community. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do from here, but this is a starting point. And
just a couple of comments, exciting report and certainly something that is very encouraging. Believe there has been some maturation in the community since the last study, and I know Judy's got a lot of inquiries. I know she's begun to distribute the study. There is a lot of interest in kind of what comes next, and I think we certainly want to be a partner and watch this evolve and try to see what might happen next, basically. And if you had any suggestion on what our next step might be, that might be helpful to the community. We have the analysis. We have that. I know Judy's distributing it. Is there a 1, 2, 3 step that comes next to try to capitalize on the analysis that you've done?
Yeah, and I would say just before we get into it, it is interesting too that going through, and actually I was not with the firm when the 2017 study was originally done, but I found it very interesting that just with all the momentum that the downtown area has been able to get, that our recommendations really kind of targeted that downtown area in the update. And actually, if it's possible, I know that Rob is messaging me that he's joined the meeting. Would it be possible to allow him to join as a participant to be able to speak? I know he wanted to touch on the answer to your question with the developer solicitation process that would follow really the study's outputs. There he is. Hey, Rob.
Hello, all. Great to see everybody in the great city of Belton and great state of Texas. A great job, Ryan. In answer to your question, there are really 2 stages that want to happen after this. Well, there are 3. The next is what I lovingly refer to as the sausage making phase. And that is where we figure out how we're going to actually fill the feasibility gap that exists, because as Ryan showed you, there's a market opportunity, but really across the country for every type of hotel almost these days because of construction costs and interest rates, and of course more locally specific to you all where rates and occupancies are, there's a feasibility gap that we've got to fill. So we need to find some tools in the toolbox, which you have in Texas more than most places, to come up with an incentive or public participation package to induce a developer. So identify a site, figure out if we're going to do rebate or abate property taxes. Are there any, can we get on the list to rebate state hot taxes and mixed beverage and other taxes like that, like so many of the other cities have done. So we got to figure that out, right? What are the tools at our disposal, and how do we come up with a plan that when we go out on the street for a developer RFP, they're not going to look at it and laugh, because we've done our homework and you've done the homework, which is the right thing to do. And so putting our study as an attachment to a developer solicitation package, which is the next stage after that, you're going to want to have the ability to help solve that feasibility gap. So we'll say this study's been done. It identified the right the following program to develop, but we've also identified how we can mitigate the feasibility gap. And so we'll show what those tools are. So we've got to get through that sausage making phase, and then we'd want to go through a developer RFQ and P process, which we manage those processes as well. And then the final stage is once you've negotiated with the developer, assuming we get through all of that successfully, then there's sort of the actualization part of it, which is shovels in the ground. The private sector does their part, and then we do our part as the city. And usually there's some public infrastructure involved. And what normally happens is on these kinds of things is that you would actually be the owner and developer of the conference center portion of the development, so that the rooms portion of the hotel, which makes the most money and profit, and can come the closest to being feasible for the private sector, is developed by them. We develop, and we can help you with that. We, being the city, develops the conference center component, leases it for $1 a year to the private sector to use that for their component, right? And sort of move down the line. So there's a very distinct set of steps that we do highly recommend that you take, and we can march you through those, and we're happy to send you a proposal if you want to talk about that in a separate meeting, just sort of grind through what that looks and feels like, how long it takes, the costs involved, and all those kinds of things. But that's, our job is to not to just be a feasibility shop and let something sit on the shelf, but actually help you figure out how the heck to get this sucker done. Now that it makes sense in the marketplace, tweak it as we go, and come out the other side with an actual project, shovels in the ground and ribbon cutting as soon as possible. Sound fun?
Sounds great.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Well,
you said the sausage making, it's the show me the money phase, right?
That's right. You got it. And we've had communities try to jump ahead of the line and say, like, we're just going to issue an RFP. And so they get a tiger by the tail, and then the tiger says, well, where's the money? And then the city says, oh, you crud. We forgot to figure that part out. So we don't want you to be in that situation.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Appreciate you guys taking the time to present that this evening.
No, thank you. And Ryan, good job.
Thank you both, or thank you all. Really have a good one.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. No action on that one this evening. So we will move to the next one, is considering a resolution supporting roadway and trail project submission for Killeen Temple Metropolitan Planning Organization, KTEMPO, 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Bob.
Yeah, thank you very much.
There's a green light.
I got the green light. There you go. All right. There we go. All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. So our purpose this evening is to consider a resolution supporting roadway and trail project submission to the KTEMPO for the update to the MTP update. So just a quick introduction on what we're talking about here, a little bit of background. KTEMPO has issued a call for projects. So we are going to respond to those for streets, the trails and sidewalks. We call them roadways and livability projects as part of the MTP update. MTP is a 25-year long-range transportation planning document that the federal government requires that we have in order to receive federal funding. So we have to update that thing for every 5 years. So the update is due in 24. And typically the funding, as you know, is on an 80-20 split. The 20% is a local match. And KTEMPO provides this opportunity because the federal dollars come through the MPO through the region in partnership with TxDOT. So we have the opportunity to leverage a lot of federal dollars in that way. And in our particular case, the deadline for submitting all our proposals is going to be October 13th, although it may be extended, depending on the volume of projects that we have. Here's a very important part that I need to share with you. All the projects that are submitted will be scored and ranked by, there's a technical advisory committee, as well as the Transportation and Planning Policy Board. Y'all just talked about making sausage. we're in that process here for transportation planning. So there's going to be a lot of people involved in what the final ranking will be when the plans are finalized. So just a quick background on us. We have currently have 12 projects, 12 roadway projects and 6 livability projects in the MTP. Over the last 3 rounds, going back to 18, maybe 16, we've had 3 projects funded, and that's phase 1 of Loop 121. That's really a TxDOT project. The sidewalks on 13th from Main to Old Waco Road, and then the sidewalks on East 6th from Main to Interstate 35. The current call for projects requires that all the projects that were unfunded have to be resubmitted and reconsidered. So we're cranking through this thing again, which gives us an opportunity to update the cost estimates, which is very, very important because we don't want to just slide the 2020 numbers forward. And so we are suggesting and we're recommending that all the current projects move forward. There's going to be some new projects that we've added to the list, and then we've revised some projects, including dividing some, which we believe will be a much more fundable options. That will be sections that are more fundable, particularly when the competition gets very stiff among all the projects in the regions. So the sources of our projects come from all our long-range planning documents, the thoroughfare plan, the sidewalk plan, the TERS, the CIP. All those projects have fed the call for projects. So currently, we're proposing 22 roadway and 12 livability projects, and the staff has ranked those for inclusion in Belton's submission. This time around, it's kind of a preliminary ranking. And they're different from the 2020 list, as you know, because we've added some new projects and we've divided some projects and have most of the new stuff is divided project. We'll go through those in a bit. And then we've revised a project like Toll Bridge Roads, which allows us to leverage a lot of private dollars. And then we've also made a new distinction in this year between projects that are in the city that are in the ETJ or maybe split between the city and the ETJ. So we have recategorized those, and dividing those projects up has helped us to kind of distinguish between those projects. So talking about the new projects, for roadway projects, you can see that we have under number 9, the first graphic is a Capital Way, and the reason we included that is because of the future industrial development that is going through there. The zoning was recently done to industrial. Of course, there's a lot of residential associated with that as well. Number 12 is the extension of West 6th Street. Probably the first time you've heard about this, but that's an extension to the west from Main up Shine and over to MLK. That's included in the Imagine Belton standards. And if it makes it through the process, we'll need to put it on the thoroughfare plan with our annual, semi-annual kind of update to the thoroughfare plan. And number 13 is Taylor Valley Road, all the way from 93 to the eastern city limits. Again, with the industrial activities in that part of town, we felt like that project needed to be added. And that's a unique road because it is not, well, it's designed, it will be designed, if it's funded and built to handle a lot of industrial traffic. So a lot of good road base and some concrete, things like that, similar to what you all have seen on South Pearl. So livability projects, let's see, number 4 is the what we call the Main Street shared use path, and it goes from Industrial Boulevard to north of Greenbrier Street, which is kind of sort of just north of the COG offices. The second one is East 24th Avenue. That's also on the very top graphic. It extends from Main over to Beale, and that's a connection that's kind of been on our plans going back a good long time. Was designed, but not ever included. Well, no, let me not say that it that way. It's good. It's a great project to put into the call for projects because it's a great livability project. Lots of regional connectivity. We think it's going to be very successful, primarily because Heritage Park is there, Beale Street sidewalks, which is not a project that's been changed or anything like that. And I think its time is coming. I think its time is coming. East 24th Street. Okay, talked about that. Nolan Creek, the crossing over Nolan Creek. I think this is a suggestion from the council retreat to provide a pedestrian crossing from Veterans Park over to Water Street. That's the way we're starting with it. So if you have any ideas from that perspective, you know, you can get in through Central, Penelope, Maine, that kind of thing. But we wanted to have something where we can go through kind of operationalize the ideas that the council suggested earlier. Number 12 is a new project that is down on Holland Road that extends from Hubbard Branch to Shady Lane, a 10-foot wide shared use path, excuse me. That'll basically close the gap between Hubbard Branch, the new subdivision down there, and Shady Lane. And as you know, the new elementary school is being built there. There's likely to be some pedestrian activity down in that area when the time comes. Okay, recommended revisions to the plan. So first of all, the revisions are both, you know, separating projects into 2 or 3 pieces, as well as revising the scope of some project. The main revision to the scope is Toll Bridge Road, because we do have River Farms with their participation interest in the road there. So we're able to leverage about 50% of all those dollars in that case. The rest of the projects are really divisions, physical divisions. For instance, Wheat Road, we've divided that into 3 phases, which, as you know, was used to be the Lake to Lake Road, extending all the way from Belton Lake on down to 16, I forget these numbers. But anyway, so phase 1 is on the north side, Red Rock to Red River to Sparta. So the second phase is from Interstate 14 up to 2nd Street or 93. And the third phase is out in the country. So it's from 93 to Sparta. And then we talk about Shanklin, basically divided 6, 18, and 20, as you can see, divided into 3. B is in the city, A is in the ETJ. See, 18 is in the ETJ, 20 is also out in the ETJ. It splits the city limits with the ETJ. And as you can also see, 8 and 16 is Mesquite Road, and we divided that up, you know, basically between Southwest Parkway, future Southwest Parkway, and the area inside the city and outside the city. And then the last one will be Southwest Parkway, which is a north-south road that runs from 121 down to Shanklin Road. We divided it up between the section that is in the city and the section that is outside the city in the ETJ. The 2 livability changes, 2 livability project changes that we made was on the Belton Georgetown rails to trails. And we broke it up from phase 1, which is from the river, you may imagine, from the river out to 35, still resolving the ultimate route on that particular path. And then phase 2 is more linear, I guess, from 93 on down to Veterans Way. It's just on the east side. It'll extend the South Belton SUP on up to where we hope to end phase 1. So that may improve the fundability of getting those pieces pulled together, I believe. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, we have some projects that are in the city versus outside the city, and then some that split the city limits, which is we got Mesquite and Southwest Parkway, Shanklin. Again, the Belton Outer Loop East, which goes from the highway out to 436 and Shanklin. And then we have George Wilson Extension way on the west side, which is actually in the Temple ETJ. So just a little note about the fiscal impact, you know, the overall dollars that are associated with the submission. All the projects together are about $203 million. That's the current cost estimate. So the projected current financial impact of the city, if they all got funded, you know, in the next round, you're looking at about 75 million. Which includes a 20% local match and all the soft costs, because the federal dollars only address construction dollars. And as you know, there's always that soft cost that's associated with it. So funding sources for a local match would obviously be determined when we actually get a project in what they call the TIP, the the Transportation Improvement Plan, and then what actually shows up in the STIP, which is the State Transportation Improvement Plan. So if you can imagine the MTP being the long-range plan, 25 years, and then they pick 4 years of that, the highest priority, they put it in the local TIP. That's our MPO plan. And they'll fund that because everything has to be financially constrained. In other words, you have to match it with the federal dollars that come in. So we're going to vie for some projects to get into there. And once they decide what gets into the TIP, then it has to go to the state, and the Highway Commission, Transportation Commission has to obviously approve those things. So we won't make any financial commitments until we get wind of any kind of AFA or advanced funding agreement from TxDOT in order to pull the trigger on any of those projects. So if we get those projects in there, then we'll be cycling back and talking about the successes that we were able to nail in the MTP. So this evening, I say all that primarily because you're not making any financial commitments with the proposed recommendations that we have in the plan today, or in the proposed submissions. Okay. So our recommendation to the council this evening is to approve the resolution supporting the roadway and livability project submissions for the 2050 MTP update. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bob. Any comments or questions from council? I would have one comment is in serving on K-Tempo, at the end of every meeting, there's an opportunity to see what public comments have come through TxDOT or K-Tempo about these types of things, where roads should be or shouldn't be, or what's going on. And so anyway, so that just to let you guys know that that they do listen to the public. So that's the comment. So the question is, when we came up with this particular list, what data source or what decision, who was making the decision that these were the right ones and the right numbers? Is that primarily staff? Did we have a working group? Did we have, how did we decide that these were the right things?
We'll try to answer that a little bit. Of course, the list before you builds a lot on the list that exists right now. A lot of it is comments that has been made by the council in previous planning studies. What we've tried to do is build into the plan as many of the projects that are shown in the current CIP and the TERS. So all the work that's gone into those plans and our thoroughfare plan are reflected in this, with the opportunity for us to leverage the dollars and get some funding. So again, we're building on the current plan, responding to the council and the request for projects like a bridge across Nolan Creek, so to speak, and the sidewalk for Main Street around to Greenbrier and all. So it's a building process. Primarily staff combined and consolidated the projects to come up with the list that's before you. Again, reflecting all that input that we've received over time.
All right.
One last question. I saw the listing for 93, but it really didn't specifically address the intersection at 93 and I-35. And that just seems to be a huge mess. I think we've had a fatality there, increased trucks, concrete trucks, and just would like a little bit of discussion about that. And
we certainly have had that discussion with TxDOT as we've talked to them about maintenance project on 6th Avenue, FM 93 on the other side of the interstate. TxDOT's response is that intersection, which is so problematic, will be redesigned as a part of the Interstate 35 project when they come through town. Basically, you have all that congestion coming together right at the interstate. We've had the accident that knocked out the signal for an extended time period, and so it is.
And that has, I think, a 2-year date to it before that gets started.
Right. It's going to be a substantial time. It's not anything that's going to be fixed very quickly. It also relates to our trail project and where you bring the trail through by the Rockwell property and then bring it across over to the interstate. So a lot of implications for that problem intersection that you've identified.
Chief Ellis.
Good evening. The Belton Police Department was invited by TxDOT to participate in a fatality review for our region just within the last week and a half or so. And we sent Lieutenant William Hamilton, and the feedback he brought back from TxDOT is they know this is a high priority and it is on top of their radar right now. This intersection and the traffic backup, the speed of vehicles. You're correct. We did have a fatality there. It was not at the intersection. It was about almost a mile before the intersection back near Hubbard. But the feedback was as soon as he went in the room and they started talking about it, they were quick on Belton to talk about Belton. There was other leaders from other agencies, and this area was kind of on top of the list. So it's on the radar.
Yeah. Thank you. I asked at I think 2 K-Tempo meetings ago, maybe the last one, asked the area engineer about this as well. And they said it's the next thing. They said within the next 2 years, they hope to start on this whole area of 35. Thanks, Chief.
This is the first time I've been through the K-Tempo project submission. It seems like we have gathered all the possible candidates for fund awarding and thrown it at the wall here. We're going to see what sticks. Is that kind of the common practice rather than saying, hey, here's our kind of really top 3 priority, give us one of those? Is that, would we just throw everything at them and then let K-Tempo prioritize based on what the other cities are also submitting?
Not really. We have history with the criteria that they use to review the project. So we keep that in mind and we try to filter those through that criteria. The other part of it is this discussion so that we can say, okay, this is where we started. Do you agree? Hopefully you do, or hopefully you have some suggestions for us. But it's not just gathering a pile of projects and just kind of pitching them out there. We do, have priorities that are all the long range plans, and with the knowledge of the previous review criteria from K-Tempo, we try to blend them together. And that's one of the reasons why we split them in half, because based on what we had in the conversations 2 or 3 years ago, was that some of these projects were just too big to get on the list. And so we figured that if we cut them to smaller pieces, we have a great, much better chance. They scored pretty good, but then the costs were too high. And so you started squeezing out of the budget. So it's a yeah, I don't want to overuse that, but yeah, it's a process. So there's a little bit of, there's quite a bit of systematic thinking internally with us. And then once we get external to actually dealing with the TAC and the Transportation Policy Board, it becomes a different process.
We recognize that for projects to compete well regionally, they have to have some, beginning and stopping point that makes difference to the region. So, for example, if you look at the recommended priority projects, the order of the projects on page 2 of the staff report, we start with the loop, the phase 2 of the loop, which is certainly important regionally. I think that'll score very, very well. Safety improvements on the IH-14 and 35 interchange, that's the merge. That's certainly a very, very high project priority to TxDOT in the region. Anybody who comes through Belton knows that's a problem. Used to just be Fridays. Now it's all the time. Connell is the next. So you see the relative priority of the projects to the community in those early projects, and then the next phase of the loop, and then Wheat Road, Franklin. So the priority level to those, and then there'll be some judgment made as we go through the process. Large projects, small projects, some trading back and forth basically with the other communities as, Colleen and Temple and Parker Heights and all vie for projects. You see, we have 3 projects in the list right now. So we're not unrealistic in expecting, this entire list to be funded, but it has flexibility over time to achieve a ranking and then be funded. And then we have funds available for our match through TERS or the CIP or another function. So we have an opportunity to be at the table. That's the main issue at this point.
I think, Dave, to your point, and Marion did a really good job of this when I think she might have been the head of K-Tempo at one point, is there was one thing that was, I can't remember which one it was, but the one thing that was really important for us.
MLK,
So,
9th Avenue.
Yeah,
Ninth Avenue.
yeah, that's right. And so what she did is she put her weight in behind supporting Temple and Colleen and Harker Heights for what their projects were at the timing. And then called in those favors whenever, and then pushed that one to the top. And I think there's that part of it. I think we do need to make sure that we put a lot of effort into a few very impactful things. But that being said, sometimes you'll have somebody not going for any funds for, I don't know, a safety trail project that you can say, well, a bridge over a flooding creek fits that category. Nobody else has it. So you have to have some things like that in there just as an opportunity. So I think, and I don't want to create more meetings for everybody. This is a really important thing for us to do and get our arms around. I would encourage the council to work with staff to understand the list, or potentially if you guys think we need to have a workshop on this, just so we can, make sure we have those things. But again, this one is worth doing a little homework. And again, like you guys mentioned, TERS has kind of gone through it. Planning and zoning has gone through some things. Staff has gone through some things. So I think it's an important thing to consider.
It'd be interesting if we could get not just Morgan's Point, but Temple support on the Lake to Lake Road and getting traffic to I-14 because that's a big burden on our downtown and other roads. That's frustrating. Yeah, the direction that's headed.
Yep. All right. Any other comments or questions?
One question I was gonna ask is there's some text dot and some industry on here, but where does Main Street fit anywhere into any of this? Or is that just something which nobody wants to talk about?
That's a good question. We have the traffic study that is, in its final form, but we really didn't have a recommendation at this point in time. We felt like that was important to get the study done and to feed that into the process at the right time, basically. But we're looking for final recommendations from the consultant on specific, actionable items that we can share with TxDOT and hopefully come up with a project that might make sense. It's always a challenge when you're not adding capacity. So like on 6th Avenue was a project we brought forward years ago with the idea of getting utilities underground and upgrading, adding sidewalks. TxDOT has come back and said putting utilities underground is not eligible under the K-Tempo funding. So that's going to be shifted to the local. Certainly the pedestrian path is. We've kind of shifted the efforts there to a maintenance project because we're not going to increase capacity on 6th. It's going to stay 4 lanes. So that's some of the challenge with Main Street without widening right away needs. It's going to be really challenging. So we're probably looking at intersection improvements, maybe some turn lanes, minor adjustments that help increase capacity there as opposed to widening to 4 or 5 lanes.
All right. All right. This is a resolution supporting this, so the chair will entertain a motion.
Move we approve agenda item number 8.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right. There being none, all in favor say aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, item 9, consider authorizing the executive director of the Belton Economic Development Corporation to execute a contract with D. Bearden Investment GP LLC for the sale of 5.6 acres in the Belton Business Park. Cynthia, your turn.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Tonight we have before you a contract for the sale of property in the Belton Business Park to D. Bearden. How did I say that? D. Bearden, yes, Dear Bearden Investments. We've been working with a broker out of the San Antonio area. He has a client that has multiple companies and he's looking to locate them to add an additional location for his companies, preferably on the I-35 corridor between San Antonio and Dallas. And so there are several sites in Belton actually that they have found to be quite attractive. The parcel that we own is in the Belton Business Park. You've seen this exhibit before. This is a map that illustrates what inventory we have in the Belton Business Park. Parcel number 1 is the subject property. It's 5.6 acres. It's actually a 5-acre tract. And we later purchased a tiny sliver on Wheat Road. And so that'll have to be replatted as one lot. But we have an offer from D Bearden Investments, and they plan to put a 50,000 square foot building on this site that will house two companies. One company will have their branch office and warehouse for an HVAC company. And the second occupant will be Warehouse Distribution, a company that distributes fixtures for apartment complexes. And so they service Texas, and they're extending beyond as well. And so again, looking for an I-35 location in Central Texas. And so they feel like this is a great site. They've offered the $1.50 per square foot, which is our asking price for property in phase 2 of the Belton Business Park. The terms of the contract, first of all, it's a negotiated sales price. They basically accepted our asking price. They'll deposit $5,000 earnest money. They're asking for a 60-day feasibility period with a 45-day extension. That extension is $15,000. It's non-refundable, but it's applicable to the closing. We will pay the 3% commission at closing. I think that's estimated like $11,000. And the contract is contingent upon BEDC and City Council approval. Also in the contract, you probably saw the language about the surveying. It's also contingent upon the property being surveyed as the 5.6 acre tract. Also, the 0.6 acres has to be rezoned to light industrial. And they will conduct a phase 1 environmental on that. Also, other language that you'll find in the contract relates to the developer beginning construction within 18 months. And if they do not begin construction, then the EDC has the option to purchase the property back. Our board of directors approved the contract on August 1st, and we're bringing this before City Council requesting your consideration as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Cynthia. Any questions? Comments? All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
I move we authorize the executive director, item number 9.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on item 9. Any other questions or comments? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank
That
you.
was easy. Thank you, Cynthia. All right, budget fiscal year 24. Looks like we have a 23 amendment snuck in there too. So item 10 is consider an ordinance adopting budget amendment number 1 to the City of Belton fiscal year 2023 annual budget. Mr. Rogers.
First, Mayor and Council, I want you to look at John Messer's face at the excitement of talking about budget yet again. Just look at that. Oh, okay. Unfortunately, I lied today.
And we'll go
Okay.
from excitement to surprise to
The disappointment.
disappointment. Yeah.
Boy, that's
Okay.
talking finances right there, my
Right.
friends. Okay, so as
5 minutes
we're
on the
ending,
clock. Dave's keeping.
so as we end fiscal year 2023, there's some housekeeping kind of measures, budget cleanup, that sort of stuff that I want to talk to you about tonight. So the first thing I want to look at budget, what I'm calling revision item number 1, is general fund revenues. So look, if we look at this center column here, that's the amendment amount that we're talking about. So our ad valorem taxes, you've probably heard me talk about a couple of times, are looking like they're going to come in under budget this year by a couple of $100,000. So this particular item reduces tax revenue from $9,388,000 to $9,178,000. Just to kind of give you a more updated picture there. These other revenues that you see there are increasing. Refuse collection, that's our waste management contract, is coming in stronger than we budgeted. So we're adding $100,000 there in revenue. This fire department cost recovery fee was implemented during the fiscal year by the fire department. That program has turned out extremely successful. In fact, we're projecting to collect $60,000 from that program in the current fiscal year. Public safety reimbursements almost doubled what our expectation was. These are costs primarily charged to BISD for services that police and fire do, security, football games, coverage, that sort of stuff. And then our school resource officer. And then you've heard me say time and time again that interest income is just amazing. I'm going to give you a number you'll see in the third quarter of financials. Through June, we have collected $1.9 million of interest this year. Just 2 years ago, it was like 40,000 for the entire year. Pretty amazing stuff.
Michael, those adjustments carry over into 2024?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yes, as far as what I'm budgeting a much higher interest income.
The recovery item and some of the other things.
Yes. A lot of that will continue probably at that same pace. These budget things like you see here. This is probably going to be this 558 for that public safety reimbursement is probably going to be closer to normal now. So it's kind of a catch up at the end of 23. Revision item number 2 is kind of related to the city administration divisions. In city manager, 021 is city manager's budget, 022 is public information, and 023 is research development. So in the city manager budget, we need to increase salaries by 16,000 for a payout of accumulated leave. The contingency in city manager is expected to go over budget this year, about to 105. We've had a settlement, a BNSF settlement we had to pay some money for. And then there was the Main Street study that we have done that weren't included in the budget. That's what's pushing this to over 105,000 in the current year. These two salaries and wages there are related to salary increases that were over and above what we expected when we adopted the budget in 23. The police department I'm putting as budget amendment number 3. You'll see salaries and wages a couple of times here. This is admin 051. This is special operations 053. Those are basically due to payout of accumulated leave when we had retirements and resignations and things like that. We also had we reclassified our peer support network costs into this division during the year. So building maintenance, this 14,000. We had an emergency generator that we needed to rewire before it burned the place down. This $8,000 you see there is to replace the fence at the impound lot.
Mike, do you expect that again next year though, or has it historically been $1,800 and we had a one-time fluke, and we're going to budget the fluke?
That was a fluke. Yes, those are flukes.
Okay.
Typically, we don't have that. This is our current budget there was more normal. We just had those kind of one-time items. Overtime pay that you see there is again related to work that was provided after hours for the school district and things like that. That's what generates that revenue that we just talked about. So those items we need to change in police. A couple of items in the fire department. Overtime pay, we need to increase by 25,000 because we were backfilling for a firefighter who was on extended medical leave during the year. And then the cost of workers' compensation insurance for fire the rate was higher than we expected. And so that we're going over budget 20,000 because of that. On the planning side, I'm calling revision number 5. This 33,000 that we need to add to consulting is due to the future land use map update that is currently underway. We did not include that at all in the budget for 23. We gave the keys to 2 families just yesterday on our home grant program. And we only budgeted 10,000, or when we were just imagining how much that would cost. The cost of those houses were more than we expected. So our city match is more than we expected. So we need to increase that as well. This 64,000 you see there under special services is the cost of our third-party inspections. Reinhardt and real estate inspection services, I believe, was helping us with our inspections. And we changed the scope during the year to increase the services that they were providing. And that's why we had a big cost overrun here. We're doing this budget amendment to catch up to what we expect. Expect to spend around 110,000 by the end of the year.
So on that particular item, we chose to do that because we felt it was going to be cheaper to do that than to do it internally.
Correct.
And so now that we're making this amendment, is it now no longer cheaper than we would have done, or was the scope different than what we thought? Like, did we have more inspections?
You might want to answer that, Bob. I can tell, well, I'll let Bob answer. This is a good question. I believe I hope it's on.
Proximity to the mic helps.
Proximity. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. All right, you hear me now? What was I going to say? Yes, the benefits of having the third party inspector is offset by the cost of the permit revenue. There's some customer service issues that we had to resolve. Because, it's a third party person and it's a little bit more challenging to manage that kind of situation. Not entirely impossible, but it was also during the time where we did not have a full-time building official on staff. And so that's how we do. We're relying less on Reinhardt, and we're seeing a better, we're still covering our inspection costs with the permit fees, but we're seeing a better customer service turnaround with the work of a gentleman on staff that can be able to handle things directly on the front lines where the issues are being generated. And so we're seeing those concerns drop as well. And so we'll see this expense drop as well. Probably not go away, but it will drop as well. So there's a hard cost benefit, and then there's a soft cost benefit that we have to incorporate also. And for 24, we're not including nearly the 110 into 24's budget.
Okay.
This was to get us to a point, to get us caught up. And so it ends there, or substantially reduces there. Good question. Solid waste and fleet maintenance is revision number 6. So this is our refuse contract. Again, this is a pass through with waste management. And so as we've had more and more people move in, our cost for collection is increasing, but that's what this ties to the revenue that we're collecting as well. Maintenance costs for vehicles is just higher than we thought. I mean, price of everything is higher. So we're overrun there of 45 grand. Hopefully that'll come down in 24. Moving on to the hotel motel tax fund, revision item number 7. When we talked about this fund during our 24 budget, it looks like we're going to have more revenue than we budgeted, about $30,000 worth or so, maybe even more than that. But so we're increasing revenue by 30,000. And then the hotel feasibility study that you just saw was not included in the 23 budget at all. The cost of that was $24,000. And so this will bring us up to what it to cover that cost. Water and sewer has several things. I'm going to show it to you this way. So water and sewer revenue, you heard me say during the budget for 24 discussion, it looks like we're going to go over budget and revenue for water and sewer, 126,000 in water, 144,000 in sewer. And again, just like the other funds, that interest income of 321, it far surpassed what we thought. We do have some expenditures that we need to increase. Payment processing fees are very high. That's credit card merchant fees. We have more and more people using credit cards, which is a good thing. And we're trying to push that. But as we do so, the costs continue to increase. That we're working on, finance is working on some possible changes to our contract, changing different vendors and merchants to kind of hope to reduce this some.
Mike, are we not, I'm sorry, John. Do we not collect from the customer that?
We do. I mean, there is a corresponding revenue that matches that.
Okay.
It's a wash, but I can tell you, me seeing 154,000 right there just kind of makes me go, ugh. I'm going to work on reducing that.
And part of that is because online, we don't have the ability to set up an ACH payment. It's credit card or mail a check.
Right.
So in future, as we're designing that online payment system, I sure hope we would have the ability.
The
For the
new
customer.
Yeah,
to
sure.
be able to.
We want it to be as convenient for a customer to pay however they can. And so, yes.
Voided check are difficult.
We can do, we offered the bank drafts. There are options like that. Credit card, credit card drafts, stuff like that. But yes, I promise we're going to look into that. In fact, the new software that we're looking at has multiple and better ways to pay than what we have now. Water costs, if you've heard me say over and over again, are more than we thought as water tap and materials, also higher than we expected. So these are the expenditure kind of items that we need to adjust as well. So that's really budget amendment number one, budget changes. Okay. What I want to walk you into now is what's happening on an actual basis. So see, BA1, I'm not, all of that I talked about is just getting the budget to kind of more match the actual activity. Now I want to talk about FY23 actuals. And so, I'm sorry.
Do we need to approve that?
It's at the end.
Okay.
What we're talking about is probably going to be, what I'd recommend we do is have a budget amendment number 2 that would do something with this. But I just wanted to make it part of that. I said I would bring back a discussion on this surplus. And so I am tonight. So several months ago, as we were looking at this, the general fund budget, I thought that there might be a pretty decent surplus at the end of 23. And it still looks to be the case. So we may have revenues of 22.2 million, expenditures of 20.7, which is a net increase in reserves of 1.5 million from 6.8 to 8.3. That puts us here at 39% of budgeted expenditures. To give you an idea of what that means, that's $3 million more than our 25% minimum policy. But it's only about $1.9 million, only $1.9 million over our 30% that we really kind of want to maintain, at least. So I just wanted to bring that up and show you that might be available. So what would we want to do with that? So any kind of one-time surplus is best used for one-time expenditures, not for recurring payroll and those kind of costs. So you may recall a discussion we had several months ago about maybe, when we've brought this up before, maybe using some of this surplus to enhance our funding for our capital equipment replacement funds. The number that I was mentioning before, it would say $1.2 million to do that. You also recall that we've got another $2 million worth of Heritage Park amenities, which could be a candidate for some of this funding, as well as some of those things that we took out when we were talking Heritage Park. There's other kind of capital items we'd mentioned before about an entertainment stage, maybe a bus or a 15-passenger van for City Hall. And then PD, as one of its supplemental requests, was $300,000 for a SWAT vehicle. And then don't forget that we have some future municipal facility needs as we are looking at doing other things. We might need to use some cash to go buy land. I mean, these are the kind of the one-time capital-y type expenditures that I'm talking about. But that being said, I want to show you a couple of things. First, because we didn't get consensus from council when we started talking about this, like the equipment replacement thing, the first time several months ago. When we were developing the fiscal 24 budget, we let that money roll into fund balance for as far as the 24 budget goes. And if we do that 1.5 million, we don't touch and let it roll into fund balance, we would end fiscal 24 if we came in exactly as we budgeted with 35.3% of expenditures. So expenditures the reserve level, we would fall from 39 to 35, even if we leave that $1 million surplus in there. In FY24, we do plan on drawing down reserves by this $168,000. And in fact, if we decided to transfer this 1.5 million in total, just send it to the capital project funds, for example, we would end up at 28.8% at the end of 24, which is below that 30% level that we kind of want to maintain. So let me show you this. what we did when we started looking at this. Budgets we look at 1 year at a time. That's just the nature of an annual budget, right? But what we wanted to bring to council in this discussion is what happens when we look out 5 years. And so we took these assumptions that you see here that are kind of typical. I'm not going to say this, I'm not predicting the future. This is what it's going to be. Every year we're going to budget these assumptions, but kind of looking at past trends and where we think we might go. We can then forecast outward revenues and expenditures. And when we do so, you see this red line that you see here. The red line is ending fund balance in each of these fiscal years, where in fiscal 24, it starts at 8.5 million. And in fiscal 28, it ends somewhere where that red dot can go at 7.5 million. So overall, that's a $1 million decline in reserves over 5 years with these assumptions, which really is not that bad, to be quite honest with you. But this green bars that you see there is a minimum fund balance requirement. Okay, this is 25% of the expenditures for each of those fiscal years using these assumptions. And what's happening is, as our expenditure budgets grow, you can see that the reserve requirement is rising faster than that red line is falling, if you will. I mean, it's catching up to where there's not much surplus at all in 28 as we go. Now, why is this important? Well, one, there's no new people in this chart. This is just 6% personnel costs kind of increase, normal pay increases and health insurance costs, et cetera. And there's also no capital project funding in there. Our current 5-year CIP shows 0 for capital outlay towards capital projects over the next 5 years. So those things obviously could change this chart that you see here significantly. So be just cautious, I guess, is where I'm headed with that. So let's just say, for example, I said, if we just move that entire $1.5 million out of the general fund into capital project funds at the end of 23. Well, okay, take $1.5 million off of that. Well, I'm starting then this 24 at that $7 million mark. And with that same down a decline, I'm going to be, closer to here or there, below our minimum fund balance requirement if that same graph happened. Again, not predicting the future, not telling you this is because I'm just using trends here to show you kind of more of a long-term outlook.
Like that 6% ad valorem tax growth, seem as well as sales tax, seems pretty conservative. The difference between we got to think about this a minute, appraised value and assessed value for a lot of people with a homestead exemption will keep going up at 10% a year for the next few years.
Right, that's values. That's not the tax rate that you might adopt, though. And again, I'm not saying this is what it's going to be. I'm just showing you that's correct. That might be conservative. This sales tax at 4% is certainly conservative compared to the last 3 years. But what this means is sales tax is continuing to grow at 4% year after year after year. There's no decline in that sales tax number, which I don't know if that's likely that we would grow at 4% every single year. Could be conservative. I don't know. But yes, as those numbers change, that changes changing assumptions changes this chart. It just does. What we're recommending is first approving Budget Amendment 1, which is what we've already talked about. And then as we talk now tonight, and we don't have to get into great discussion unless you just want to, because anything that you want to do with that surplus, if you want to do something with it, I will bring that back as a Budget Amendment number 2, either late September, early October, as we close out the fiscal year type of thing. But Budget Amendment 1 or the other stuff that you'd seen. But what I kind of ask you to do is think of those future needs of reserves in the over that 5-year time frame. Again, the fiscal 24 budget as it sits proposed today, we rolled those into fund balance, and that's what you see there. And as we say, there's going to be a use of reserves next year, and that reserve balance is reserve requirement will increase as we go. Any other questions about budget amendment number one or what we're doing?
Where did the stage fall?
Okay, so here's.
If,
Go.
if you don't mind,
Please.
from just a procedural standpoint, let's consider the cleanup amendment items, since that's pretty black and
That's a
white.
great
Let's consider that motion, and then we'll have the discussion on what to do with that.
That's a great
So,
idea.
any questions on the cleanup amended items on both revenue and expenses as presented?
Was it item
All
10?
right, no question. So that's item number 10. So the chair will entertain a motion on the budget amendment, number one on.
I move we approve agenda item number 10 is presented.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second, to approve a budget amendment number one as presented. Any other questions or comments on the budget amendment? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, let's talk about the other item. Is now that we have $1.5 million in fund balance, there were several items that we could spend our money on.
Yeah.
Well, you had a list
That's correct.
already, and so I didn't see that on the list, and I felt like that was one thing you had talked about.
So yes, thank you for doing that. That way we get that out of the way, because this would be. it too.
Okay. you did.
So stage. That stage idea, we just kind of think we need to vet a little more. That was thrown into the budget process very late in the discussion. It was just a number that we threw out and stuck to it. And then I think we just need to have more idea of how's it going to work? Who's going to use it? What does it look like? Are we going to charge people for it? Those kind of discussions I think we need to have. And we can certainly always bring back a budget amendment in 24 for a purchase like that. I just, for the sake of not really even knowing the true cost of this item, which will also have to go competitively bidding.
So we didn't get a quote? We didn't get a quote?
We have a quote.
That's fine.
Again, you can't, it's 100,000, a little over. We can't go by a quote because it has to be competitively bid,
Well, sure.
but that gives us an idea. It's just,
Okay,
There was also talk about a used stage, a new stage, just a lot of operational questions that came up that seem to suggest we might need a little bit more time to just evaluate that. So it is not in the budget right now, in terms of the budget draft that you have before you. And so I think we would like as a staff to just kind of vet that a little bit more, evaluate that and figure out, sources, opportunities for something used. Is it the direction we really want to go? Is that the best use of the resources? Rental has certainly become a challenge with some of the other competing events in the area, but that's what we would ask for, just a little bit more time to
I
evaluate.
just ask that it doesn't fall off the radar. Having personal experience trying to locate and set up stages for events here, it's very frustrating. And I know it's got to be for your staff.
And we have an event in September, correct, with that stage? And didn't that thing fall?
I mean,
The last, yeah,
It's-
the lid.
I guess I thought there was more discussion on the staff level that raised that to a level of a need, even with some council member here at a previous event. So,
They also use that same state.
yeah, rickety. Just
Certainly,
keep
the
it
more
on
we
radar.
use the one that's in the area, we certainly raise that question about the need, and I think we just need to focus on that, and we're not going to drop it. It's something that we need to resolve, whether we buy something used, buy something new, just exactly what we end up doing. So it's on our radar.
Thank you.
I have a question about the 1.5 million surplus. What did you say we were over our increased interest income was compared to budget for the year?
a lot.
$500,000.
Over $1 million.
So
Way over $1 million.
What
Between the
over?
two,
oh,
between the
So both
two, it
sides.
was 809.
so we're still budgeted, right? Even if we had zero increase in shit. Concern I haven't. Thought I heard 1.8, but
Yeah, that's, we've earned like 1.9 through June.
but we budgeted.
Probably, I couldn't tell you the number. It's
up there.
maybe $100,000. That's what I'm thinking.
So we did have an increase in interest income of more than what our surplus is for the year.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
all those amendments.
let's just-
we did, the pluses and minuses on all.
Yeah, so Yeah,
We
you
just
could say a
approved
lot
an
of that.
amendment Of interest, is that your
So I think
question?
we've already done one.
Two different ones that were over, so
Yeah.
general and water, right?
Yeah, and the interest income we spread throughout every fund that we have. Not all of that 1.9 is general fund, which is
Got it.
what we're talking about here.
Some were water, but still in
Yeah,
it.
that's-
So. My 2 cents on when we come to this point, I think this is one of the reasons, I know it can be frustrating for council. I say frustrating. We put a little pressure to say, hey, let's really sharpen the pencil and get close, because when you come up with a surplus like this, or the opposite side, you go
Yeah, sure.
negative. We just want to make sure that we're kind of tying it, because when you get to this, it lends itself to not the best use of money. We use it because it's there, not
Right.
because we need it. And so many times we find ways to spend it instead of planning on next year, we really need these 8 things. So I think that that's probably a fair statement, that we'd like to do that. Now, that being said, we've had a really good year. I think we have 3 options personally. I think one is save it for a rainy day, keep it in the general fund. I think option 2 is this is the citizens' money. We return it to them in a lower tax rate next year, and we eat into, we put it in the general fund in 23, we take it out in 24.
Mhm.
I think 3 is probably a hybrid of the 2, is that we or where we put some in and we put some maybe in capital improvement, and then we return some in that. So I think that I don't necessarily know that we will be able to arm wrestle and get to that, but I think what's probably best is for us not have to go through it, is that we come up with like of the 1.5, if it's a third goes towards rate reduction, a third goes towards capital improvement, and a third goes to buffer for future growth in the general fund to help us keep it that 30%. I'm just making that up. That may be a wiser discussion to do that, and then not worry about, is it going to be a SWAT vehicle, or do we need to pay for a new ladder truck? Or, I mean, we're not going to have the knowledge there, but I think putting it into a fund that those groups like Heritage Park Amenities could propose, hey, here's the extra funds, and you as a staff. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know what council would have to add, or.
And our general fund has earned additional interest that could help fund some other projects. But I'm leaning towards a little taxpayer relief as well. That's a big windfall, 1.5 million in a year. A lot of it from interest income. But what's a penny is 180,000 for 2024 budget. A penny off this year, a penny off next year. You're maybe getting close to penny and a half, a third.
Yeah.
Working towards a third. I mean, maybe spread that out over a couple of years, not all at once. Easier on the city from a budget standpoint, saving some money for a rainy day, but also providing a little tax relief to the citizens. I am still concerned about water and sewer rates. We're going up significantly there. We're going to adjust or transfer out 5 million out of our water and sewer funds for future capital projects, which is just an astounding amount. And so that combined with an adjustment, if we were to move that 1.5 million out for capital improvements, boy, that really adds up across the board.
My thought is we need to tuck it away and save it. I'm really concerned that this summer is not an aberration, that it may be relatively a new normal. We're going to need that money for a variety of purposes if that continues. It is even to drill a well if it comes to that. That water that's below us, if you go deep enough, is some pretty good water. Some of it's not, but I'm real concerned about spending any of it or reducing that balance, because I'm concerned about future needs and just the facilities alone. We're out of room in a variety of places, and I think we need to set that money aside and use it wisely down the road. But I mean, we all want to cut taxes, but I'm really concerned about the future budget, just like you showed these lines right here.
And there's no urgency to make a
Yeah.
decision on that right now. So I
I-
think the
I-
wise thing is maybe to just set that decision aside. You approve the budget amendment. Let's
That-
go on to the discussion about the tax rate, which has implications for what we might do. You'll have to set a rate for the public hearing notice, tonight. And so there is some relationship to that and perhaps just defer this decision. As we look at the budget for 24, the other, needs that we have basically, and leave us the maximum flexibility in terms of what we do going forward.
And it certainly gets us, this could all be part of a fiscal 24 discussion, and that gets us away from the knee jerk. Here, end of the year, let's just do something.
Yeah.
This is, if it rolls over into reserves, we could plan that and bring that back at some point during early 24.
So we don't create a whole work session tonight. I think what would be best is for each of us as council members to get with Mr. Rogers and share with him or Sam what you feel you are. We don't need a walking quorum and us kind of talking about it outside, but talk to staff about what your druthers would be. Hopefully they'll be able to poll the audience, kind of get kind of a consensus from us, and then we'll put it on a future agenda item as we have room to kind of come up with that. Right, there's no action needed on the general fund surplus at this time. Any other comments about it before we move on to the next item? All right, there being none, the next one is to call a public hearing on the City of Belton fiscal year 2024 proposed annual budget. I think you're over your 5 minutes already.
So the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget includes total resources of $47,789,000 and expenditures of $45,433,000, including transfers, planned use of fund balance and activity from VDC. A public hearing has to be conducted before we adopt the budget. The final action to adopt is scheduled for September the 12th. And that may depend on what you do here with the tax rate. Staff recommends calling a public hearing to be held at a regularly scheduled council meeting on August the 22nd. At 5:30 PM here in the Harris Center to discuss the fiscal 24 proposed annual budget.
Right. In our notes, it shows a September 12th scheduled meeting.
Yeah,
And you're saying August 22nd. So
Well, August 22nd is the hearing. We won't adopt until after that.
for this action item, we'll have to call the public hearing and we'll need to use that date in our motion. So I just want to
That's
make sure
correct.
that the council understands which
Yes, sir.
date we need to motion. So this is just calling the public hearing. So
For the budget that's been prepared and presented to us already.
Correct.
That includes the gold package ask, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So to speak? Okay.
No change.
The gold.
Yes. Well, it was, what was it? It brought
silver. I don't know. Silver. I think it's silver.
everything that we talked about already. Yes, it includes.
Thanks.
Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for agenda item number 11 for the August 22nd, 2023 budget public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to call the public hearing on August 22nd. Any other comments or questions?
Does this deal with our published proposed rate that goes in the paper? Okay.
That's the next
Sorry.
one.
Thank you.
This is just the budget at this point.
Ready to vote.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Next item is to discuss and consider a proposed ad valorem tax rate for the 2023 tax year fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, now tonight we have to propose a tax rate for the 2023 tax year, which is our fiscal year 2024. So let me show you what's happening to our tax roll. Today's value, if you will, of the properties that existed in 2022 is $1,832,000,000. The value in 2023 for those same properties is $2,183,000,000, an increase of 19.2%. Of that 2.1 billion, the captured value within the TERS is $378 million. That's an increase of 24.8% over 22. That leaves $1,805,000,000 of taxable value that will be used for operations and debt, the tax rate on that.
Of the $350 million increase in total value, new property is 104 million, or about a third of the total increase in value comes from new property that was added to the roll in 23. So I'd like to show you this chart and kind of walk you down a little bit here. The market value of all of the property in the city of Belton is $3,089 million. There's an ag or productivity loss of 27 million, which brings you to a total appraised value of $3,061 million. This is the one I want to point out here. Homestead increases, homesteads can only increase by law 10% in value. There's a cap of 10%. There's $198 million of value above that 10% cap on single family homes or homesteads. Okay. The good news about that is that value of that 198 million kind of rolls into the taxable value over time as you know, market values continue to increase. You'll start to capture some of that 198 million. That leaves our total assessed value of $2,863 million and $679 million of tax exemptions. That's about 24% of the total assessed value of $2,863. Most of those exemptions are due to 100% exempt property. That's your schools, that's your governments, that's those buildings. The next largest category we have is 140 million of disabled veteran exemptions. Okay, that brings our total taxable down to $2,183 million for 2023.
Mike, just a quick question.
Yes,
The potential property tax relief that may pass this November with the homestead exemption change, will that impact? How would that impact us, or even will?
That was only for schools, the value for your school
Okay.
taxes.
Okay, I don't think I realized that. Okay.
2 years from now, we might be having that discussion and how that might apply to
Okay,
everywhere else.
thank you. I'm sorry.
So now,
Before you
Yes, sir.
move from that, one of the things, and John mentioned it, when we're looking at modeling future revenues from ad valorem tax, the cap of homestead increase, that cap, that will bleed out over time. That cap is because the assessed value will continue to go up 10%. So that 198 million is 10% roughly of our taxable value.
yes,
So the reality is whatever our growth rate plus some portion of that 10% will hit us.
correct.
So we will likely grow faster than your model showed earlier, just because we've got 10% basically in reserve.
Yeah.
But we'll be just, even if the values of the houses don't do nothing.
Right.
We're going to see a 10% increase in ad valorem tax.
That is a correct statement.
Yeah, okay.
Very articulate.
About that.
No, seriously. It's been.
So now we have some benchmarks we have to look at. You've seen this before, so the first thing we need to look at is is the no new revenue tax rate. This used to be the effective tax rate. The no new revenue rate brings the same amount of property tax revenue from the same properties that existed in 2022. Okay, it excludes all of that new value that was added to the roll. And mathematically, if as property values go up, the no new revenue rate, the rate that would be required to bring the same amount of revenue, would go down, and then vice versa. If property values go down, the no new revenue rate would push up. Next is the voter approval tax rate. So our property tax rate consists of two components. There's the debt service rate, which go figure, pays debt. That's what it does. Then the M&O rate pays for operations and all of the costs of salaries and the whole thing, cost of operating. The voter approval rate brings in 3.5% more money for M&O, just from M&O, and then adds a debt service rate to it. Okay.
you can adjust that voter approval rate by an unused increment rate is what they call it. An unused increment is the difference. If you adopted a rate in previous years that is lower than the voter approval rate, you basically get to bank that and carry that over for 3 years. We have no unused increment rate now for this fiscal, this calculation that we're talking about now. We've used that already, and they're changing that. The legislation that was passed this year will change that slightly. The next rate we have to look at is a de minimis rate. So this for cities under $30,000. I'm sorry, 30,000. I'm used to money. 30,000 in population. Yeah, for small cities, what they call it. This is the fire engine rate. So if you could buy a fire engine for $500,000, which is what the legislature said back when they did this, you're allowed to go over that 3.5% voter approval rate to capture at $500,000 plus your current debt rate. So this is where truth in taxation gets confusing. If the de minimis rate exceeds the voter approval rate, it's the de minimis rate that's your voter approval rate, not the voter approval rate. That's truth in taxation for you. Okay. Essentially, you get to go, if de minimis exceeds that voter approval rate, then it's the de minimis that would require an election to go over that. That's your new cap. So where are we? So the calculations that we were just received, we have a no new revenue rate of 52.32 cents, a voter approval rate of 54 cents, and a de minimis tax rate of 55.17 cents for $100 of taxable value. That's the calculation. So tonight, you need to propose a tax rate. So our budget, when we were developing the budget, we include obviously property tax revenue. And we do that, the dollar amount that we have in the proposed budget as it sits now is just taking, it's always assumptions as we were going along. We were using preliminary information on property rates, property values, et cetera, to get to a number. Well, that number is $9,617,000, $8.4 million in M&O and $1,197,000 in debt service. That's what's in the proposed budget in revenue dollars. To get that amount of money, $8.4 million and $1.1 million, we would need a tax rate of 53.26. So what the good news is the 53.26 is in the middle of these. The worst thing that happens when you do that kind of budget development is you get to the end and then the rate that I have, the revenue in my budget is more than the de minimis rate. So we're good there. 53.26 is what I'm calling the budgeted rate. That doesn't mean that that's the rate that you should propose. We can change our budget before we adopt it to match whatever tax rate that you decide that you want to propose. So what are we recommending? Management is recommending a tax rate of 54 cents. One, it's an even number, but two, that's still a 4.5 cent reduction to our tax rate. And the total is 9 cents in the last 2 years. It wasn't that long ago that we were at 63 cents. It wasn't that long ago previous to that, we were 65.98 and we were at 65 for about years. So now we would be looking at, a 54 cent. That 54 cents allows us to do everything that we have in the proposed budget, that $1 million for street maintenance, the employee compensation, all the new positions, et cetera. And in fact, it would bring in the 54 cents brings in like $130,000 more in revenue. So this use of reserves that we have currently in our proposed budget of $168,000 would fall to $34,000. So we would still be using reserves, but we'd use less reserves than we have in the proposed. The other thing that does to you, just the way this works, is that $130,000 of additional revenue becomes our starting point for calculating a no new revenue rate in FY 25. So remember, we're only in 24, we're only adding 11 of the 39 positions that we recognized, whatever, 37, whatever the number was, that we recognized as needs. So, you know, that's not going away necessarily. And so that additional revenue, I mean, we could use in those future years too. This is a sheet I kind of want to walk through a little bit. You should have this in front of you to make it a little easier to read. But this is the old colorful sheet that you see every single year. So it's probably easier to look at the one in front of you, but let me walk you through this. So this column that you see here, if you can see that mark at the top, is our current tax year. And our current tax rate is 58.5. Our value now is 1,832,000,000. The TERS is 302 million. When you apply that tax rate, our total levy was $10,720,000. Taxes, the tax levy that would go of that 10.7, the tax levy that goes to the general fund is 9,309,000. $1.5 million of that goes to the TERS, which then gets you to that number, 7,772,000, is the general fund's property tax revenue in 2022, our current fiscal year. Debt service, the levies 1.4 million, 232,000 goes to the TERS, which leaves 1,178,000 to the debt service fund. And 152,952 is what you would get out of one penny. So I'm going to skip that average home stuff at the bottom and come back to it. So now what we've given you here is what's the effect of three different tax rates. One of those is the no new revenue rate of 52.32. One of those is in the pink is what I'm calling the budgeted tax rate of 53.26. And then the blue here is what I'm calling the recommended rate of 54 cents. So for all of these new years, our taxable value now is 2,183,000,000, and TERS is 378 million. So at the no new revenue rate here, our total tax levy increases $705,000 to $11,425,000. A 6.5% increase to the total levy. Now, if we look at just the general fund part here, at the no new revenue rate of 52.32, the total tax revenue for the general fund still increases by $477,802. That's all from new property that was added to the roll. In fact, the tax coming from that no new value, that new value is actually more than 477. That would be a kind of a decrease from existing. At 52.32 and all the rest, other rates, our levy for debt is $1.1 million, a $19,000 increase. And in all of these other equations, we get 180,564 from every penny. That's the no new revenue rate. At 53.26, which is what I'm calling the budgeted rate, the levy increases 910,000 in total. Again, that includes TERS. The general fund revenues increase 647,000 at 53.26, the budgeted rate. Again, the same 19,000 for debt service. At 54 cents, which is what we're calling the recommended rate, the total levy increases just over $1 million, $781,000 of additional revenue to the general fund, 19,000 again to debt service. But let me now walk you to the bottom and let's see what's the effect to our average homeowner. And that's this here. Let's go back to this down here. So in 2022, the average home taxable value the average taxable
home value, I guess was the way to say it, our average of taxable value of a home in Belton was 240,103. And that average home paid $1,405 of property taxes to the city of Belton. In 2023, the average taxable value has increased 13.74% to 273,091. And then at the various rates, at the no new revenue rate, they'd pay $24 more than they did last year, $49 more under the budgeted rate, and $70 more in property taxes at 54 cents. That's at the average value. But what I added this year to this schedule is, what if that average home was a homestead, right? Not just the value of the average home, which is what I have to legally put when we print our notices. It's going to say just that average value of a home. But I wanted you to see, what if that average home is a homestead, there's a 10% cap on the value that home could increase. And so under the no new revenue rate, that homeowner would pay $1382 instead of $1405. They would actually pay $23 less at the no new revenue rate than they did in 2022. At the budgeted rate, they would pay $2 more, only $2 more than they did last year. And even at the recommended rate, it would be a $21 increase in total taxes paid to the city of Belton. We're going to come back to this because I know you'll want to see it when we deliberate. But any questions as how this works before I move on?
What if you could show you have the de minimis rate, the no new revenue rate, the proposed rate. You had that one that shows all of those.
Yes,
Got
sir.
a question on that.
Okay,
As
okay.
far as
That's, I can go
the
back. there very quick.
banking of the 3.5%. You can bank up to 3.5%. So if you don't go up to your voter approval rate,
Yes,
you get to bank the delta between what your rate is. So if we were to come in at 54 cents, which is the voter approval rate, if it's voter approval rate minus our current rate is 0, we bank 0. Are you calculating it based on the de minimis tax rate, which is the highest rate we can go, which is the now de facto voter approval rate, or is it calculated based on the voter approval rate? So example, if it was 52 cents, do we get to bank the 2 cents? Or do we get to bank the 3.17 cents?
He's not a lawyer.
Well,
I know what you're
but
saying.
this-
No, I know exactly what you're
talking
saying. So I think the way it's interpreted is it's the difference between that 54.
But not our max rate.
Correct. De minimis is just kind of his own little thing. The law says the difference between voter approval rate and what you adopt. The law does not allow you to interpret or to apply that term voter approval, meaning going to an election, to be that higher of de minimis or voter approval. It literally means voter approval.
Okay.
So if the voter approval rate is 54, and let's just say you adopt 53, that 1 penny you get to carry over
Yeah.
into next year for 3 years. Now, I will tell you that the legislature wisely, I mean, the way it was intended back when they created all this. The legislature changed that with this past legislature to not say you get to carry over that 1 penny rate for 3 years. The legislature has changed it to where going forward, it's going to be the foregone revenue amount. It's dollars. So if that 1 penny is $180,000,
that I'm foregone because I went one
Yeah.
penny less than 54.
Understood.
Then I get to carry that 180 over for 3 years, and that 180, as your values grow, that becomes less than a
Percent,
penny.
yeah, yeah.
Which is really the way it was probably intended.
Yep, understood.
Um,
Okay, I was just curious because the other thing, and you've mentioned it, I think most of us understand. One of the arguments for keeping your rate higher is it allows for a higher rate. The 3.5% on top of 54 is more than a 3.5% over on a 53-cent rate.
Yes.
And so if you go down, you kind of punish yourselves because you can't go up as much in the future. And I just wanted to understand this because I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yes,
Also.
that's correct. Does that make sense? I mean, did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. That was my question.
let me just go back here. Bear with me. Okay, so let me do this as well. Because that gets ugly. So what are your options tonight? And again, we're going to go back to that chart as we deliberate. Your range, if you will, is 5232 to 5517. I mean, technically, the range is 0 to 5517. But those rates that we're
budgeted.
Yes. So what could, what are your options for tax rate? You could adopt the voter approval rate or the recommended rate of 54 cents. I'd mentioned that it's going to bring in $130,000 of additional revenue. And so I would have to modify the budget that I bring back for adoption, increasing those revenues by $130,000. That's one option. Or you could go no new revenue rate. So if you go no new revenue of 5232, I'm going to have to reduce the revenue in the budget, if you will, by $169,000. So I would take that 169 and add it to the 168 that we already have there. So in 2024, we would basically draw down reserves by 338,000. Not the end of the earth. We could live with that. I'm just telling you that's what we would do.
No. The math's not adding up for me. Is the 338 would be a reduction in what it would have been at 54 cents? Or it's actually taking money out of the general fund, 338?
That 338 is the change to the budget as it sits today, which is at 5326.
He's budgeting a loss of 168,000.
Yeah, I'm already budgeting a loss of 168.
Yeah.
And if I'm bringing in now less revenue because I'm budgeting a 5326 and we go with 5232.
Okay.
That's that 169 on top of that. So your other option is, like I say, the budgeted reserve. That's just the rate that captures the revenue that we have reflected in the proposed budget as it is today. We wouldn't change anything there. We would have a planned use of reserves of 168,400 in the general fund budget. So what happens what are the steps next? Tonight, you propose a tax rate. You're not adopting a tax rate tonight. What this rate would be essentially set the maximum rate that you could adopt in September or August or whenever, when you adopt a tax rate. So you propose, but you can't go over the proposed when we get to adoption. You can go under, you could propose 95 cents. I'm just making up a number. And then just come in less than that when it comes to adoption. But the rate that you propose tonight kind of sets that cap. But in your deliberations, as you decide this, one thing I do want to keep you in your head is that when it comes time to adopt, any rate that is over no new revenue will require 5 affirmative votes of council to adopt that rate. So what that means is now's a good time to have that arm wrestling, fist fight kind of just debate. Because if we really can't come real close to 5-2, we have some work ahead of us. Doesn't mean that you can't have a 4-3 tonight. You certainly can. It's just that we'll have to have more discussions as we get closer to adoption. Once you propose, we got to post those rates. We're going to publish a notice in the newspaper very quickly, and then we're going to hold a public hearing. and then we have to adopt. That public hearing and adoption of both the tax rate, the budget and the tax rate, kind of depends on what you do tonight or more what when you adopt. This is the way it is, guys. We've been on this accelerated schedule. You remember probably that when we started this whole thing, I pushed back the start date of our budget calendar by 1 month to get us to this point. So the way the law says is if you adopt, the word is adopt, not propose, but I'm using those two hands in hand. If you adopt a rate that's higher than voter approval, which in our case is 54 cents, we have to adopt the budget and tax rate at least 71 days prior to the November election day. 71 days before, even if we're not going to have an election. That's just what the law says. That would be Monday, August the 28th, which would really coordinate to us into an August 22 adoption of the budget and tax rate. That's next meeting, guys. If we go over the de minimis rate, which is now our highest rate that you're allowed, if you go over de minimis, which in our case is 5517, we have to adopt the budget and the tax rate 78 days prior to the November election date, which is Monday, the 21st of August, which means special meeting. That I'm just telling you that's what it is. So that's why I'm giving you these we don't know what the public hearing dates are going to be and all that until we kind of go through this proposed rate. So I'm going to go there, and then we're going to go backwards then to that colorful chart that you have in front of you. So we can kind of talk about that. I'm here to answer any questions.
And so to be clear, anything below 54 cents won't require the election calendar.
Correct. If it's 54 or lower, we would adopt budget and tax rate in September. That's September 12 that we talked about.
Right. And yeah, that's the main point I wanted to make.
If we were, that's why I push everything back, because if we were just doing this in August, late August, you wouldn't have an option but go below that. So this is the option time.
And so tonight we're really proposing a not to exceed tax rate, and we will adopt a tax rate that may be equal that or less in the future.
That's a fantastic way of saying it, Mayor.
Okay.
And this is the published tax notice.
Correct.
In the paper.
That's correct. Yeah, whatever you propose is what goes in the note.
In addition, Mayor, this requires a roll call vote.
Okay. All right. So what discussion would you guys have? We're going to have to come up with an exact number. Somewhere between 0.5232 and 0.5517.
Mike, when's the last time that the revenue that was actually received was less than what was budgeted?
Councilman Pearson, I did some research this afternoon on that. The ACFRs, the financial reports that we have online go back to 2007, as far back as they go. And in no year did revenue come in lower than our original budget for that fiscal year, all the way back to 2007. May have been some prior to that, but I don't have easy access to anything prior to 2007. Does that answer your question?
It does. So we budget frugally and conservatively. And so I think that it argues that we're probably going to have some excess. Now, it's over and above budget. I don't mean excess, but over and above what we programmed to bring in. And this year being an anomaly with $1.5 million, almost all of it coming from the increased revenue from interest rates. But what we've budgeted at what would be the pink rate, the 5326 is what we say we need. And it seems to me like we're probably going to have some over that anyway, which gives us more flexibility. I agree with Councilmember Carpenter that we need to leave that $1.5 million where it's flexible and we can do something with it later. And so I would argue that we worked hard to come up with a correctly budgeted amount, and that's the 5326. And that's where we need to land. That gives our citizens a significant tax break totaling over 9%, almost 10, well over 9% if we stay at that rate. And that's what we've went through the process and came up with. And so I would be very comfortable at 5326.
Thank you, Craig. Other comments?
Along the same lines, but I'm kind of more on the knowing what we know about interest income, the comments that you've made over the last couple meetings about you feel that, Mike's not here to tell the future. We can't tell the future, but we have some pretty good experts on the panel that think the interest income trend continues for at least a little while longer. Knowing that, I don't think we're going above what's budgeted. I don't think the 54 is necessary. I also honestly not sure the 5326 is necessary. If we're talking about cutting a break for the taxpayer and banking $1.5 million, that $1.5 million in itself is going to, in its own right, grow its own self. If you were looking at just that $1.5 million. So I think you'd have a pretty good catch up. And, if we've never fallen short on revenues, I don't want to cut us too short, but I also feel like it's hard for some people out there right now.
Very.
And, everything we can do, every little bit helps.
Thanks, Daniel.
So on the, Mike, and I'm sorry to ask probably some silly questions, but on the no new revenue rate and then the budgeted rate, the dollar change from current year, that's figured into our budget amount with those rates, right?
What's in our budget now, you're correct,
Okay,
is that number there.
Okay.
647. So, and I'm just showing you this, if you were to then say you want that number, the change, the delta is between those two numbers.
okay.
So $170,000 less in revenue at the no new revenue rate than the rate that's in our budget.
And that was the $333,000 dip into general fund.
That's correct.
If we did that, no new revenue. Right?
Yes, sir.
And the chart that you showed earlier of the 5-year trend of
No, can't.
the actual general fund reserves and the required reserves getting closer together over the next 5 years.
Yes, sir.
That's based on your pink.
Also based
section.
upon the pink
Okay.
for 24. That's correct.
That was also assuming keeping the whole surplus.
Correct. Also assuming that.
I did some quick calculations while you're flipping through it. Basically, in the third year, if we didn't keep the surplus, I think it's in the third year that we would start dipping into below our minimum. If we did nothing else, if we just anyway, so not 3 years, we have to start making the adjustment.
And on that chart, the green numbers, those are based on the 25% required minimum, not the 30% goal.
Yes.
Or those are based on the 30% goal.
That was 25% minimum.
Okay.
Not the 30% goal.
So it becomes a problem at that point.
In third year, yeah.
And I guess that's the real beauty of why we do this every year. Then if we need to adjust the tax rate, we do that to make sure that we have a minimum required balance and are able to run the city and make adjustments along the way. What a process. A couple of points that jumped out at me is where our debt service goes down by a penny. That's adjusted over to M&O. And at the 5326, we're seeing an 8.33% increase in revenue, 14, just under 15% in TERS, which we have so much more flexibility with. 9%, over 9% for the general fund. And the 54%, I just wouldn't feel good about publishing that as a maximum rate. I'm afraid the cause of backlash saying that we had the ability to go up 10%, just seems excessive to me. So I think the 53.26 is a maximum rate, and then working from there. Mike, you've done a great job. I don't think interest rates are going down anytime soon. We don't predict that to happen until second half at the earliest, possibly last quarter of next year. And so, I think you're up to 5.25, 5.5 on interest earnings now, which is just nuts from where we've been, which is good. And we aren't issuing debt. We issued some debt earlier. I think we've been very frugal. And the thing that if we collect it, I'm bothered if we collect it and don't spend it, and don't have a plan for it. And so we increased our reserves by 1.5 million. We're reallocating a tremendous amount of money in the 24 budget. And I think if we could give the taxpayer a little bit of break and be fiscally responsible, 11 new positions. I think the gold list, and we found ourselves talking about a bus, a SWAT vehicle, or a stage. It might be time to cut it just a little further.
I would agree with all of that. I think I feel very comfortable with the budgeted rate, knowing that that's a maximum rate. And I think I still have a lot of questions about the amount that's going into reserves, and just some questions around that moving forward. Not tonight, though.
Any other comments?
I think the budget that we've come up with and all the planning that we've done to point us toward a budgeted rate of 53.26. I understand the idea of not wanting to back yourself into that corner too early with a proposed rate. But I think it's a good budget, and I think it's conservative, like so many have said. And so I don't see myself 2 weeks from now or a month from now or whatever voting for anything higher than that as an adopted rate. And so I feel like I'd probably be comfortable voting for that as a proposed rate tonight. The 53.26.
Echoing what John said, our goal is to budget year to year, not for 4 years. And so while we're planning for 4 or 5, and like we saw with the roads for 25 years, we need to keep that future plan. I will say for staff and for us that counting on 5.5%, this $1.5 million extra dollars in interest income is going to go away. I think the aggressive appraisals that we've driven our houses to a market level that is probably higher than sustainable market level. I think we're going to see a decrease in property values potentially in the next decade. And I think it'll level back off, but I think we've seen a bubble. And I think that's why we finally missed because Mr. White over at the tax appraisal is hitting appraisals higher than what they were protested at. And so they came down. So I think we may see that again this year. I think our ad valorem, because we still have some properties under how many dollars in
There's like 102 or 112 million still under protest.
Yeah. So we're gonna 112. Yeah, that we're gonna see. So I say all that stuff to say that I think we need to be cautious in trying to grow too fast, and because I think we will become dependent on this up and to the right graph. And for those of us who've been here long enough, we've seen things go down and to the right. And so I just say that, and I think one of the better ways to prepare for that is to be frugal tomorrow. Don't let your cost of living outpace your cost of earning. So get used to living in a 2-bedroom apartment. Don't get used to living in a 20,000 square foot house. Right. So I think that that's one of the things that we probably have some concern on pushing the rate too high is we need to kind of force that savings, save the cash in the general fund, but continue to force that savings in our budget because we don't want to have to go start cutting 11 positions in 3 years. So from that standpoint, I agree with what's been stated so far, the budgeted rate is kind of the maximum, and the no new revenue is something that we can consider targeting as we discuss what to do with the general fund surplus
Right.
and the rate. But that's something that's going to be separate from this particular motion. The chair will entertain a motion on the proposed ad valorem tax rate for 2023.
I'll make a motion that we set the proposed tax rate at 0.5326. Second.
A motion is second to set the proposed tax rate at the budgeted rate of 0.5326 per 100 valuation. Any discussion or comments?
Thank
I-
you.
My only concern is the future. I think we're not looking at future needs, and I don't know that $1.75 a month is a huge burden for anyone. Especially in the light of the fact that most homeowners are going to get a substantial reduction in taxes on the school side. That's not us, I realize, but we have a lot of unmet needs that we're still not addressing. And that's my concern. I'm comfortable with the 54, and if there's heat, I'll take it, but that's where I stand.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. All right, we have a motion and a second. It will be a roll call vote. So, Amy.
Councilmember Carpenter,
No,
Councilmember O'Banion,
Yes.
Councilmember Covington,
Yes.
Councilmember Booker,
Yes.
Councilmember Pearson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holmes,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Motion passes 6-1 to set the rate of 553.26 per 100. That being that item, the next item is call for a public hearing on the proposed tax rate that we just discussed for 2023. Is that the August 22nd date as well?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Because we have to have more time for publications, and you have to post this proposal. It's a longer calendar. So staff recommends calling a public hearing on September the 12th, 2023 at 5:30 PM, Harris Community Center, to adopt, for the public hearing on the proposed tax rate for 2023 tax year.
I'll make a motion to adopt what was just said as presented. September 12th at 5:30.
Second.
A motion and a second to set the public hearing for the adopted or the proposed tax rate for September 12th at 5:30 PM. Any other questions or comments?
I mean, would we adopt the budget on the 22nd
No,
or the 12th?
That's a
the
public
way
hearing.
what you've done tonight is said the maximum is 50 is less than voter approval. So September
Talking about the
12th
budget,
would be budget and tax rate
Got
adopted
it.
as well.
just the hearings are different dates.
Hearings a different day.
Perfect.
Any other questions or comments? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. That ends the regular session, and so we will adjourn this meeting. I will ask for a 3 to 5 minute recess, and we will enter into executive session pursuant to the provisions of the Open Meetings Law, Chapter 551, Government Code, Vernon, Texas Codes annotated in accordance with authority contained with 551-072, deliberations regarding real property. All right, no action will be taken afterwards, so everyone can go home.
I guess.
Right.
Just gonna figure out this on.
What if wait, I think we may have to go out.
I do too.
Stay next door to here.
I do too.
Hey, Sam.
I think we're gonna hit a rough patch. Yeah, I wish I weren't.
Well, I agree.
That's why.
Drilling the well is gonna be water sewer. But I think we're gonna have to drill a well that we can start diverting water from Lake Belton instead of opening the floodgates to go down to we're gonna just start pumping into our aquifer.
There's gonna be a lot of associated.
about that too this week. Having to drill a well.
A lot of other associated costs. If we have this kind of thing again.
Well, my landscaping plan will change next year.
Well, trees are my biggest.
Mine already has.
concern.
Well, I've got,
I can do without St. Augustine, but
We're gonna
I
have
can't
to,
do without my oak tree,
no,
trees.
yeah,
No.
Yeah, I'm dumping tons of water on my, cypress. Oh, because cypress do not like this at all.
Yeah.
And they're in a low area.
It's a pretty tree too.
It is,
Well,
when it's not around. When it goes, it's kind of like, St. Augustine. It'll just die.
there's increased mechanical failures, a whole list of things you start, and I'm sure you have some 313, the impact of that kind of prolonged heat.
Yeah.
And none of those are built in
Yeah.
to our cost.
Yeah.
Oh.